I'm very delighted to be joined by writer-director Benjamin Cleary. Benjamin, you're very welcome.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks so much for having us. Appreciate it, Gar.
Delighted, thank you for your time. We're also joined by actress Naomie Harris, who plays Poppy in the film. Naomie, you're very, very welcome.
Hi.
Thanks so much for joining us. And we have producer Rebecca Bourke. Hi, Rebecca, how are you keeping?
Hi, good, thank you.
I'm going to start with Ben a little bit. Ben, a lot of people here in Ireland would probably be aware of your work to date. Like you won the Oscar for live action short film in 2016 for The Brilliant Stutterer. You've won multiple IFTAs, including for Stutter and later Wave, which you co-directed with T.J. O'Grady-Peyton. I think that was 2018. But this is your feature debut, and like what a debut. As I said, it's beautiful, it's subtle, it's clever, it's sad, it's very, very confident, I would say. And I believe it comes from a kind of personal place for you. Like what inspired you to write this story?
Yeah, I lost a few friends tragically sort of when I was 19, 20, 21. And that was the seed for this, really. You know, I think after that, I was affected by it in a way where it started to become part of, or in the years that followed, I started to think constantly about what might happen, you know, to my family if something happened to me. You know, what would, I think I took that with me and started to constantly catastrophize, you know, and I think then years later it bubbled up into the idea for Swan Song and the exploration of that. So that was the genesis of it, really.
That's beautiful. Like, obviously coming from a personal place, I'm sorry about the loss of your friends, especially at such a young age, but was it a difficult story to write for you because of that, or was it something you felt was kind of cathartic?
It was both, really. I think that, you know, I had to shine a light back on some stuff that was quite painful and things that I'd never really, you know, I'd never gone to therapy about it or anything like that. So it was kind of I was joking saying it was kind of like the last 5 years have been like this prolonged form of long overdue self-therapy or something like that, you know what I mean? But so it really was cathartic for me, and I think I definitely had moments along the making of it and even on set, you know, where it was overwhelming in a way, and watching, you know, the work that Naomie and Mahershala were doing and Glenn and everybody, it was sometimes hard to not let that bubble up, you know, in a way. And you had to kind of, I mean, it was, there were so many moments in this film, and I'm sure we'll get into loads of this, but it was like, you know, watching what Naomie and Mahershala created in Poppy and Cameron. I'm kind of digressing a bit, but there were so many times where we'd be watching a take and it would just completely hit me, and I'd have to compose myself after we called cut, and I'd look around the room and see the entire crew just sort of all in the same world. So it felt like there was this sort of magic being created in front of us every day on set. And to bring it back to the question, I think that, you know, you try, if you're writing from a personal place, a place of pain, I think that those things find their way into the work, hopefully, and hopefully people react to those and find that there's some truth to it, you know, emotional truth, perhaps.
I think emotional truth is probably a phrase I would definitely use to describe this film. Like ostensibly, I suppose it's a genre piece to an extent in that it uses like sci-fi conventions, but what I absolutely love about it is that it, like good sci-fi, I think, uses a certain amount of kind of cognitive dissonance, or like using a certain distance to kind of look at something that's here and now and in us. And I think this does a fantastic job of that through the tech of like helping us to kind of put us in the place of Cam. What would we do in that position, and kind of what would we look at like that? What was, when you were kind of coming up with this story, was it always a kind of sci-fi angle to kind of look at it through that lens, or did you kind of have any other instincts first?
The premise came up, and it was, yeah, it was the premise that came up almost like 10 years ago. That was like, yeah, it was the initial seed, and I quite quickly realized that what I was really talking about, you know, like I had the ending was kind of pretty much there, you know, and, you know, no spoilers for those who haven't seen it or whatever, but this idea about, goodbyes, you know, and how hard it is if you don't get a goodbye with someone, was really the driving force of this. So I quite quickly knew that, yeah, the premise was there, and it was a sci-fi premise, but it was, even though this is a completely imagined set of circumstances, I knew I could imbue it with personal emotions, you know, and things like that. And yeah, I think that's the only way I know how to write, in a way, is to somehow delve into personal things and then try and write it, even if it's through a metaphor or whatever, you know. Like you can write something like Stutterer, my short, which is about someone who has who has speech difficulties, and that, even if you haven't experienced that, you can explore something yourself, whether it be like, you know, getting bullied as a kid or something like that. You don't have to be autobiographical, you know. So I think that's how I find my way into something, and it's how it, you know, keeps my attention anyway. The ones that are personal somehow keep my attention more, and you need your attention kept if you're going to work on something for 5 years, you know what I mean?
Well, certainly as a viewer, I can say it held my attention because of that same kind of, I suppose, truth and emotional truth in it. And it reminded me of like the Kubler-Ross kind of, you know, range of things. Like it's was it anger, denial, bargaining, depression, acceptance with grief. And it's like, it takes bargaining, like, what if I could, and oh, maybe I can, and takes a little kind of sojourn in that area, but kind of, well, it's spoiled, but kind of have to complete the process anyway. But I'm just going to come to Rebecca in a second. But before that, what I love, and thank you for this, Daniel, is you don't over-explain to the audience. There's not a single wasted bit of exposition in this. It doesn't over-explain the technology, and it's just so refreshing not to have like a broken clone running around in the background, or, you know, someone trying to steal the technology, a corporate war thing. And it's, the sci-fi and technology is there, so well realized, but that's not what it's about. And you really treat the audience with respect in that, I think. But was that difficult when you were writing it? Did you ever feel like making it, having to conform to more standard kind of sci-fi tropes at any point?
The film was never about the tech or the sci-fi, so it's great. Thanks for that. Like, it's great that, yeah, and it's been lovely that audiences are, I mean, so some people watch it and really want it to be, you know, more of a, you know, ex machina or things like that, which I adore. I love that, all that sci-fi, but it's just not that. It's for me, it was always about the love story, the human story at the center of it. Poppy and Cam, Corey. So that was in a sense, it was easy then, in terms of a kind of creative compass, to know when you were on the right track and when you weren't. And, you know, you would get notes in sometimes. All of the producers and everything were excellent, on this, but you would get notes in sometimes that would talk about maybe pulling the curtain back a bit more on the science, but that was always something I was never interested in. And I luckily got great support from everyone who worked on the film in that. And then everybody making it knew we weren't trying to make that film, you know, the one where the robot goes bad. I was always kind of saying, like, the twist is there is no twist. I mean, not to give away spoilers here. That's a massive one, I guess. But, like, you know, it was just never that. The robot goes bad thing was just, you know, it wasn't that movie. And I think you still subvert the genre. You're aware of the genre. You use those sort of things that, you know, the audience brings to the film as a tension device. But, you know, the film has its identity, you know, tonally, and you just stick to that.
Absolutely, and it works terrifically well. Rebecca, I'm going to bring in you in here. You produced shorts beforehand, like the aforementioned Wave we spoke about, but also Jam for Brendan Canty, Unsaid for Stevie Russell. This is obviously, we just talked a bit about the story and the genesis of it, a hugely ambitious piece. How did you feel making that jump as a producer from shorts to like such a kind of behemoth of a project, I suppose?
Yeah, it was quite a leap, you know, the baptism of fire of the century for me, to go from short format to that being the first feature. And initially, I came on board as a co-producer, and then COVID prolonged things, and I gradually kind of progressed from co-producer to eventually full producer. But it was great working alongside Ben. I mean, obviously, we've been working together for 7 or 8 years at that point, and we've known each other for much longer. So it was an honor to be taken on the journey. And you know, I think we had a lot of trust in each other, and we knew how we were going to work together. We had 5 other fantastic producers that, you know, as Ben said, were super hands-on and great with the creative notes, but I think that we were probably more, our relationship was more in the trenches, and so we were working around the clock to bring it to life. And it was an amazing experience, very, very challenging, but I wouldn't change a day of it.
Oh, fantastic. And like you mentioned, it was a baptism of fire. So I guess I'm wondering, for any, short filmmakers or producers here who are looking to make the leap to feature film, was there anything particular in the run up to the film being shot, or in the production process, pre-production process? Was there anything particular challenge you had to overcome, or anything you learned that was of specific value to you?
So much. I have a list of everything that I learned, and things that I would probably try and do differently next time, because you are learning on the go, and when we initially started into prep, and when I came on board, it was December 2019. When I got to Vancouver, it was February 2020, and we were only 4 weeks into prep when technically everything was put on hold, and we wouldn't end up shooting then until November that year. So things changed for us. One of the pros of having to stop for the pandemic was it allowed us to do more prep, and to, I suppose one of the biggest things was, like, it gave Ben the ability to storyboard the entire movie with Sam Hideki, our storyboard artist, who was phenomenal. Apple were very supportive. They allowed some of our HODs to continue to work. So most importantly, the art department, and that was headed up by Annie Beecham, who's phenomenal. And there was a lot to work out, as again, not a spoiler, it is set in the near future, but 20 years from now. So there was a few elements that had to be kind of nailed down before we got back into official prep, and having that lead up to it was ended up being quite beneficial for us. But what I would say is, and we never really have the luxury of this, be it in long format or short format. My biggest piece of advice would be, where possible, don't rush your prep. If you can, take as much time as is humanly possible, because I know that a lot of filmmakers are eager to get their work out and seen, but the more time you have, and again, as I said, I know it's not always a luxury, but the more time that you have, the better the result is going to be, so.
That's fantastic advice. And like, you certainly got so many things right in this, not least your cast. And we're going to come to Naomie now in a second, but like, the heart of the film is this love story between Cam/Jack and Poppy and Corey. And I can't imagine anyone else playing those roles at this point. Before we come to Naomie, how did you get the script to Mahershala in the first place, Ben? Like, was he always kind of one of your top choices, or how did that come about?
That was an amazing moment for the movie. I'm trying to think of the exact way it happened, but I think I just pitched it to Apple, and they'd gotten back and said they want to make the film, which was amazing. And then a day or two later, got the news that Mahershala had read the script and apparently loved it, which was like a pinch yourself moment, because I'd loved his work for years. And so we went and had a meeting back in the days when you could actually, it wasn't all Zooms. We went and actually sat in a room, kind of thing. And we just had one of those amazing 2-hour chats where we just spoke loads about it, spoke about connections to it. I immediately just knew I was sitting across from just a wonderful person, and his, how he spoke about the script and the character and things like that was really inspiring. It was just one of those energizing conversations. And then at the end of it, he just said, I want to do the movie, which was like, which was amazing. So that was kind of, that was it. So I really, just to put it in perspective, I suppose, when I first started writing Swan Song, I thought that, it was going to be super low budget. We would just, try and make it with whatever way we could, and then it just, over the years as I wrote it, it started to grow into something bigger. And then you get a moment like, getting someone of Mahershala's caliber on board, which I'd never, ever imagined would be the case. And that sort of set it off in motion then, I think, because then it was amazing. I got to speak with Naomie, and Naomie signed on, and then it was like, that's the heart of the movie. And I suddenly was working with just two of my favorite actors. And, you know, it kind of, yeah, really starting out the project, I had no idea it was going to grow to that. So that was a surprise, a beautiful part of the whole process.
Absolutely. And you just mentioned like having the heart of your film there, and Naomie, congratulations. It's an incredible performance. Before we talk about it, just how did the script come your way in the first place, and what was your reaction to it?
So I got sent the script by my team, and I was told that Mahershala had wanted me for the role and wanted to work with me again. And I was just so deeply honored because obviously working with Mahershala on Moonlight, I only worked on that movie for 3 days, and we basically only worked together for a day. So we didn't really get to know about each other's working style really. But then we spent like 6 or 7 months, it was an incredibly long time, promoting it. So I really got to know him as a person, and I just have such phenomenal respect for him as a human being. He's just so kind and generous and has such amazing integrity. And so I knew that working with him would be a fantastic experience. So I was honored that he wanted to work with me, and that was a big pull. But, you know, my mum's a writer and I grew up reading scripts. So for me, the script is always everything. It's the Bible. It starts and ends with the script. And if it's not there on the page, so many times I have like producers trying to persuade me to do projects, and they say, well, it's not there on the page, but, you know, we're going to work on it. And it just never, ever happens. I've never been fooled by that, because it doesn't work like that. The magic has to be the ingredients have to be there already. But I read the script and I was just blown away by it. I was moved. I, you know, welled up, and I just thought, if I'm going on such an emotional journey, just reading it, it's going to make a phenomenal film. But then the clincher for me was really having a conversation with Ben, because he's just so incredibly charming and passionate and such a gentle soul. He has this amazing marriage between like such strength and such clarity of vision, and then also such softness and sensitivity. And I think those are the two things you really need as a director. And so I knew that he'd make a phenomenal leader, and I was totally right. You know, I had a truly fantastic experience working with him. I couldn't have asked for anything more. So
that's beautiful to hear. And like I think it's really interesting, because Poppy in one way isn't what I'd associate with like a lot of your characters, who are like really kind of tough, independent characters. And not that Poppy's not strong, but she is in a much more kind of everyday kind of way, like as opposed to someone like Shriek in Venom or Paula in Moonlight. But like, what drew you to Poppy? What was your initial reaction to her on the page?
I mean, to be honest, it really wasn't about Poppy, and it isn't the first thing for me, isn't the character, it's the project as a whole, and then can I contribute to the project as a whole. So if I feel like I can add something, so I said yes to it because I thought it was amazing. I thought it was, you know, so beautifully written. And then I had this character that I thought I had a few problems connecting with, because you're right, you know, I choose roles because I like to play strong women. You know, those are the women that I was raised by, and that's what I saw surrounding me, but they weren't really represented on screen. So I always set out in my career to play strong, independent, powerful women, and Poppy doesn't really fall into what I initially thought of as being a strong woman. So I struggled with finding her at the beginning, but she took me on a beautiful journey where I learned that strength isn't, you know, something that's demonstrated all the time. Strength is also can be about being centered in your vulnerability. You know, strength can be about loving so deeply that you're wide open to the world. It's just a different kind of strength. And I think it's actually stronger. So I feel as though this character like changed me as a person in a really wonderful way. So I'm even more glad that I said yes to it.
I kind of need all of what you just said on a big inspirational poster about strength and vulnerability. That is. I do love as well that we kind of learn more about Poppy through Cameron, and more of Cameron through Poppy, I think, which, like, I'm not married that long, but that certainly seems to be the case, that I learn more about myself through my wife than, you know, I ever have. And there's that beautiful kind of, her role is as important to I suppose, Cameron's character as his role is to hers. And I think there's a beautiful kind of two-hander in that, even though it's ostensibly focusing on Cameron and Jack. One thing I wanted to talk about was, Ben, did the script change much at all once you had your cast in place, or is there any changes to that? Like, do you play to any of Mahershala or Naomie's strengths that you wouldn't have had otherwise?
Yeah, of course. I think when you get the material and you start to interact with all of your collaborators, actors and HODs and everybody, I really have a very collaborative ethos. I really try not to be precious about any of the script. That goes for dialogue or things like that. Like, I'll always be open to playing around with that. We did a lot of improv, which we can chat about in a bit, which was just amazing watching that, mainly for the Poppy Cameron stuff. Actually, only for the Poppy Cameron stuff. For the snippets of memories, we would do improv, and it was just phenomenal. So that was amazing. But yeah, the script, I think that it's fundamentally, the script stayed the same. I don't think there were huge changes that I can think of. Certainly the last 30 minutes, last 20 minutes is almost word for word the script. But yeah, you find things, and sometimes that's in the lead up. Naomie would have some notes, a few thoughts about oh, well, what about this, that, and we talk through it and then implement it in the script. Glenn, similarly, when I was speaking to Glenn initially, she had some fairly major thoughts about the character and how it could be changed, and we had this brilliant back and forth where I went and rewrote elements of Dr. Scott and actually merged two characters and things like this, and then sent it back to Glenn, and she was like, all right, I'm on board. So yeah, you do, and the beautiful thing about that though is that it sort of represents what I think is great about film. It's this huge collaboration between lots of people, and lots of great minds, and lots of great creative thoughts come in, and if you're open to them, the film overall gets better, and you do it together. And of course Mahershala he's in every scene. He's playing two characters, so we had a huge amount of back and forth about that, and bringing specificity to the character. We had just endless conversations about that, and it just helped. Those details are amazing, I think, and that can be on a scene by scene basis, or it can be about a character trait or anything like that. So yeah, there was a lot of that, of small tweaks, but all those small tweaks and little details really add up to the whole, I think.
Absolutely. We'll come to some of those little moments that Mahershala's character has. Before we talk about the shoot, I just want to talk a little bit about the other supporting cast. You mentioned Glenn Close there, of course, and you also have Aquafina in there. Rebecca and Ben, maybe. I love the way Aquafina's character is introduced, by the way. I think it's just masterfully done. But could you talk a little bit about getting both them on board? Maybe Rebecca on that one.
Yeah, getting Glenn on board was that kind of happened as one of our other producers, Jonathan King, joined. So he was instrumental in securing Glenn, and he's just an incredible producer and person, and he was such a great addition to the team. And we had been looking, we were looking at Dr. Scott's character, and Glenn's name had come up, and I think Ben was, we knew if there was an opportunity to have Glenn on board to play that character, that she would be absolutely perfect for it. And so Jonathan liaised with her agents, and as Ben said, the exciting part of this was, a merge took place between two characters within the script, which added to Dr. Scott's character and ultimately actually improved that storyline, and we got Glenn on board, and it was just very exciting. She's a fantastic actress and person, so it was amazing to be working with her.
Absolutely. And Aquafina then?
So Aquafina, Ben, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so Aquafina first came up in my very first meeting with our wonderful casting director, Vicky Thomas. We just started popping a few names back and forth, and she said, what about Aquafina? And I had seen The Farewell, Aquafina was in and was blown away by it. I thought it was a brilliant movie, so well done, and I thought how she did in that role was amazing. And the thing about it was, so it was a great bit of just a great suggestion from Vicky, that luckily we ended up coming to fruition. I think that the role, although it's a kind of small role, you might say, in the film, like there's not a huge amount of scenes, it's a really crucial one, and it's quite a difficult one, I think, because tonally she has to turn on a dime between these quite heavy sort of scenes into suddenly being a spark of humor. And I think that humor, those little moments of humor in Swan Song are important, I think, just to sort of cleanse the palate a little bit, give us a little chuckle, and then get back into the story, which can be fairly heavy. So I think I was really excited to speak to Nora and to Aquafina. Sorry, I switched between the two names there, but to speak to her, and we just had a great conversation. I really just got so lucky. I think, like, when I think about all of the lead cast, like, I had these just amazing conversations. Naomie, our first conversation was just great. We had a phone conversation. I just was like, wow, this is amazing. I remember finding out that, you spoke French, and, we spoke about some of our personal connection to the material, and just straight away, like, this just felt right, and I had that totally with Mahershala, with Glenn, with Aquafina, so it was just a bit of a dream experience. And then getting to work with everybody, and that continuing into what an amazing shoot was just, I felt really lucky, because I know it's not always that way, right? So that was nice. But yeah, that was how Nora came on board. Just a really good Zoom. We totally saw eye to eye about it, and that was it. I knew she was right.
That's great. Like, it seems that everyone kind of bought into the same ideal and vision you had on it. And sorry for saying Aquafina. I thought it was Aquafina. I asked someone today and they said, no, it's Aquafina. So apologies if I mangled that.
Oh yeah, I don't know either. Yeah, I could be saying it wrong too.
So let's talk about the shoot a bit. You mentioned you shot in Vancouver, I suppose, during the pandemic, but there's actually one scene I really want to talk about, and that's the opening scene. So without spoiling too much for people, and I think meet cute is almost really reductive to what a beautiful, beautiful scene is between Naomie and Mahershala. Where Mahershala, well, I won't even get into it, but there's a mix-up involving a bar of chocolate, and it might be the cutest damn thing I've ever seen. Can you tell us a little bit, where that scene came from then, and filming it? Yeah,
I mean, one of my favorite parts of the whole shoot, because it's such a beautiful moment, and it's light, and we were a lot of the stuff we were filming was emotionally, heavy, and so I think we all really appreciated that. I think we might have done a day and a half on that, or something, or 2 days maybe. Last day before Christmas, we were up for Christmas actually, so we were all exhausted, so it was a much needed lift. But the scene came from a friend of mine's sister. That scenario happened to hers, where she was sitting in a hotel lobby, and a guy sat down and said, can I sit here, or whatever, and then proceeded to eat her Kit Kat, and then afterwards she finds her own eaten Kit Kat in her pocket, and they'd had this back and forth, and the awkwardness and the utter mortification of that. So I'd remembered the story from my mate Steve about his sister, and then it just popped into my head when I was thinking about how Poppy and Cameron might have met, and it felt tonally like the right thing for the story. And I always thought, God, that would make a great scene in a film. So that was kind of where it came from. And then shooting it, what I'd say about a scene like that is it was always a scene where I thought, this kind of thing, and yeah, this meet cute or thing or whatever, in the hands of, if it's not handled correctly, it could become kind of a little too sweet, or saccharine, or things like that. So how it's shot and how it's set up and all those things are just really important to try and keep it so it doesn't go into that place. But most importantly, it's the acting, and on the day, I remember, we did a little bit of blocking, talk and stuff, but we weren't rehearsing. We were just kind of talking about it. And I remember we started shooting, and I was just like, wow, oh my God, okay, that's it. Because you see acting like that, and it's just, it just felt so real and so nuanced, and just I just completely believed it from the start. And then shooting it for that day or two was just a joy, because it was just, the scene had come alive, and it was
it's a beautiful way to start the film, because it reminded me of Up, in that there's this beautiful little story that almost stands by itself at the start, but kind of really kind of sets you up for the rest of the film. Naomie, Ben's absolutely right. Like, that scene is remarkable, because the two of your performances silently, stealing each other's chocolate, depending how you look at it, is brilliant. And he mentioned you didn't do a lot of rehearsals there. Am I right in saying that you and Mahershala kind of work that way? You don't like to kind of rehearse too much, you kind of just come in with your own energy. Like, how is a scene like that to do? Because it's like there's such a spark between your two characters in that scene.
Yeah, it was beautiful to discover, because like I said, I didn't really work with Mahershala on the last project that we worked on together. I didn't spend very much time with him in front of the camera, but so it was wonderful to hear. Like, I really do not like rehearsing, which is quite unusual. So I asked if it was possible that I didn't do any rehearsals, and the message I got back from my team was that's totally fine, because Mahershala doesn't like it either. And I was like, oh my God, perfect. And then we were really lucky with Ben, because some directors would feel like a little apprehensive about that, and feel like, I know that you guys don't want it, but I really need it for me, or what have you. But he just kind of allowed us to do our own individual processes, and trusted us enough that we knew what we were doing, basically. And so that scene on the train and every other scene, we just worked individually, and then came together and just saw what happened in the moment and reacted with each other, which for me, I think is always the best way to work, because then you have more spontaneity and more truth as well. If you over rehearse things, I think it becomes a little stale. And also, like, there can be some awkward moments, or some things that don't really work so well in the moment because you haven't rehearsed. But I actually think that sometimes that awkwardness can be something that works beautifully on screen. So I always prefer, to just try things out in the moment. And when you have a really good director like Ben as well, one of the beautiful things they teach you is that, and they allow space for mistakes, for you to fall flat on your face, because I think that's the only way where you can find true magic, really, when you feel that secure and that safe to try anything.
That's beautiful, and it's something that's come up in a lot of these discussions we've had, where they're really good films that have come from really good sets, that actors have been given this space to be creative, and to trust in the director that they can be creative and have that. But it takes so much planning to allow for spontaneity as well. I think that it has to be like so really built into the project. Just stick with you, Naomie, a little bit. Ben mentioned earlier there was a lot of kind of improvisation around certain things as well. Was there anything in particular, any particular scene or element of Poppy that you're particularly proud of, kind of improvising or ad-libbing?
I think all the improvisation about her losing her brother was particularly tough to kind of go from kind of zero to like deep emotional pain and bereftness and grief, so I'm particularly proud of those moments, because it really put all my acting skills to the test, to go from 0 to 100 in a moment, and improvised. Yeah.
Wow, that anyone who's seen the film know the scenes we're talking about there. That's incredibly impressive that was improvised. But you're right, there is that truth and rawness to it that is, or not even awkwardness, I suppose, that is much more real. Ben and Rebecca, just to come back to you on that as well. You on the shoot, you shot in Vancouver, and there's some beautiful scenery of the Pacific Northwest as well. We'll come to in a bit. But you mentioned you shot during COVID, and I imagine even like the scene we're talking about there in the train and stuff, there was restrictions and all that. Like, it was a blessing in terms of the the slight delay. But I suppose, Rebecca, do you want to talk us through any of the challenges, I suppose, that COVID brought in that way, or were there any issues, or was it all like pretty straight ahead?
The train shoot stands out to me. It's a very strong memory, because all the days start to merge into one, but there's certain days that do stand out. And actually, just before I go on with that, the scene that Naomie shot, that moment where she's grieving her twin, and actually having a twin myself, like, there was not a dry eye in the house. Like, that was incredible. That was a moment I don't think I'll forget as long as I live. Professionally, it was just, you're watching, just like a master of the craft. It was unbelievable, and what you're watching isn't real, but you get made feel with every inch of your body that what you're witnessing is completely authentic and real. And, you know, it was just such a testament to Naomie. I remember going up to you that day, I was crying my eyes out, and she's there comforting me in between working, which must have been fun. But no, there's really standout days. And that day on the train, because it was a confined space, that was actually quite a tricky one for us in regards to the COVID of it all. So we could only have Naomie and Mahershala, and obviously then Ben, and just the absolute necessary HODs on the train, and the rest of us had to stay outside. Like, we absolutely had to, and there was no budging on that. And the day was very, very stormy. There was rain, we were in tents, it was absolutely freezing, the heaters kept breaking because we had so many on the go, and we were watching this scene. And I think if any of the other producers or even our wider crew were there, you know, everyone would say that that was an incredibly significant moment in the entire shoot, because and again, not to be cheesy, but even though it was freezing cold and we were soaking wet and the heaters weren't working, watching that scene play out really warmed the cockles of our heart. You know, it was just absolutely beautiful and so natural, and we didn't want it to end, to be honest. You know, we loved it. We loved watching them. We could watch them for hours, and we were all wondering, like, is that man out there? You know, is that woman out there? That couple? You know, it was just, it was beautiful.
You're exactly right, because it drew me into the film straight away. It's one of my favorite film openings, but it actually did feel like I had a great day today because I saw that happen on a train, you know, like on my way to work or something. It was so beautifully real.
Yeah.
And something that wasn't real is obviously you didn't film Mahershala, but those scenes with him as Cameron and Jack together, and I'm thinking particularly, there's, spoiler alert slightly, there's a kind of struggle scene where they have a bit of an altercation, and I just found it amazing how it was done, because it didn't look like over the shoulder shots of the double. I don't really know, A, how you did that physically, and B, how Mahershala was able to play off whatever was there, like, was it, if it was a stand-in or what was happening. Can you talk me through a little bit on those scenes?
Yeah, totally. I definitely, there was moments, you know, in making this film where I thought, like, what on earth was I thinking, you know, sort of biting off all this crazy extra technical stuff. But then when you get to it and you surround yourself with a great team, you know, really, really amazing crew, and an actor like Mahershala, who's just so incredibly in control of his craft, and is just so diligent and so prepared, and all that, you just do it as a team. So it was a real challenge, like, I think, to shoot one actor for two, and make it look completely seamless, you know. But there's so much to it. I'll try and be as concise as I can. I suppose I think my biggest job was to try and work out a way to do it in the least technical way I could. So I decided not to use any motion control, right, which is a system that can be cumbersome and can, you know, take a lot of time. I wanted to do it a little bit more simply. So split screens over the shoulder, you know, shots, singles. We used a double, this great actor Shane Dean, who would act across from Mahershala to pull it off. I think that was all done in a way so that, because all of the emotionally, a lot of the stuff that Mahershala was having to go to, the places he was having to go to, and the things he was having to do were so heavy, I wanted to try and get out of the way a bit with the technical. So that was the thinking behind that. In terms of, like, some of the ways we did it that worked really well, I remember, like, quite soon into it, I suggested that we use Mahershala's, if we were shooting Cameron first, we would take what he did as Cameron, the audio, and then when he moved over to Jack, I'd play back the audio of Cameron. So he'd act across from Shane, but his own audio had been playing from the previous takes of Cameron. So he was acting to his own cadence and rhythm and things like that. And that really helps, because Mahershala has got such a distinctive and specific rhythm. It's just this beautiful pace that he manages to find. So that really helped, I think, for him to sort of find that seamless acting across from his thing. And sometimes I'd mix up the takes a bit. I might play a different take to give him something fresh to play off and things like that. And we kind of found techniques like that were really all focused on not the technicals and more so about the performance, and with Masanobu, our wonderful DP, our big sort of principle, I suppose, was never have a shot in there that's just for the sake of showing off the doubles. Like, how would we shoot this if it was just two actors? That was always our litmus test, and I think that was a good thing. Like, you need to have a few shots in there, like when he first sees Jack, where we come in off him and we're on the steady cam and we come across and meet his duplicate. You need to have shots early on in the film so that the audience forget about it, really, and once that's done, then it gets out of the way. So, I was cognizant of that. So you did need to have a few shots that were ambitious like that, but really it was always about, how can we be simple here? How can we be truthfully do this like we would if it was just two actors and not the twinning, as we were calling it. So yeah, hopefully that's answered. I've forgotten about
incredibly well, actually. That's I can't believe that thing of playing his own performance as Cameron back when he's playing Jack. That's so interesting.
It was amazing. Yeah.
I just want to talk a little bit, and if anyone here is watching hasn't seen this, I'm going to talk about the ending a little bit. So please mute us, just for a few seconds. I'll do this when we're done, okay? But I have to talk about the ending. I watched it with my wife and we bawled our eyes out. Absolutely bawled my eyes out at the beauty of it all. Like, when Cameron goes to the house and you think he's going to confront Jack, and Jack just goes, "Do what you have to do." And what happened next, I wasn't expecting. He sits down and has his first drink with his son Corey, his drink with his son Corey, and they eat edamame, and then he hugs Poppy. And I'm actually getting emotional talking about it now. I was in absolute bits, but it kind of reminded me of that Kubler-Ross thing again, like that it goes to the part where like you're bargaining and like, maybe I can do something here, but then you still have to get to the acceptance point of view. And even as a viewer, I felt that. You said you've had the ending in it for ages. Like, it must be amazing to see that kind of come together with like these great actors and the great team you had with you. How was that? Was it emotional for you seeing these things?
Oh, deeply emotional. I mean, the greatest gift, I suppose, for a writer, writer director, I suppose, as you go through the process, is to see words you've written completely elevated, by what's happening in front of you. It's kind of hard to describe, harking back to the scenes we discussed briefly that Naomie was speaking about, those grief scenes. I mean, you write some words on a page, like, a little sentence, and then you watch one of the most profound things I've ever seen in my life happening with what Naomie did in those scenes. And so, you can write something, but it's surpassed by what brilliant actors bring to it. And I think the ending was that it's kind of, I'm sort of almost getting a bit emotional thinking about some of those scenes, because they were just it was so incredible. There wasn't a dry eye in the house as we watched them. The Corey goodbye and the Poppy goodbye, that was just like incredible. And a little bit like the train scene, you write a scene like that, you write the goodbye stuff and you write those words, but then you just see it unfold, and it really totally surpassed what I'd hoped for it. So that was beautiful. And then the very end, as well, which is interesting, because the very end scene where he comes into the room and there's the screen and Poppy comes onto the screen, like, it's actually a really technical scene. I hope it doesn't feel like that and it's sort of seamless. But it was so, we had to shoot the Poppy footage right down the lens back 6 weeks before that, and plan in advance exactly how it was going to be on the screen, and then how Mahershala would come in. And it was so technical, and there was so much working out of that scene and how it would actually work and make sure it felt right. But then on the day, because of the performances and because of that connection, that just dissolves, for me as the first audience, it dissolves, and I'm just watching the connection. And so all of that to say that I suppose, you can say, oh yeah, well, the last 25 minutes or whatever the movie were totally word for word in the script, but really, actually, that's just a fraction of the story, because what you see and what actually does manifest with talent like that is incredible.
Oh, absolutely. And again, it didn't feel remotely technical, that scene. I just thought it was one of the most beautiful, beautiful things ever. That scene of Naomie Poppy there saying, "I love you," and just cutting to Mahershala's face. I just thought it was absolutely stunning. Naomie, you mentioned when we were talking beforehand that you find it, it takes you a while to watch your own work. But when you did watch Swan Song, like, how did the film affect you, and like, what was your response to it?
Yeah, it's really interesting actually hearing Ben talk about all the technical aspects of it, because as an actor, I don't think about any of those. I have no knowledge at all about directing, producing, or any of the kind of technical side of things. And my instrument are my emotions, so that's what I'm focused on, and that's what I play with. And likewise, when I'm watching movies as well, it's not really the technical aspects that I'm kind of looking at. I'm not looking at those tiny details. I'm just kind of impressed by the whole piece. And I think that's when people have really done their job, right? You shouldn't be looking at things in really technical ways. I think the emotion should really hit you. And it was definitely like that when I watched Swan Song. I was just deeply moved. And I got really emotional. I thought, am I allowed to get emotional? That's something I'm in. Do you know what I mean? You have to cry when you're watching yourself.
Sorry, that might be the most Irish thing anyone has ever said. Am I allowed to be emotional? It's something I look at myself. That's amazing.
But it's such a beautiful movie. And unless you have, a heart of stone, I don't know how you can watch it without being emotionally moved.
Absolutely. And everyone at home, that's it for the end now. Spoilers over, okay? We've got a few questions coming in for people, so if you have more, please do add them in. But I've one for Ben and Rebecca here, where someone says, you mentioned Annie Beauchamp, I hope I'm saying that correctly, you're a great production designer. There's some incredible production design in the film, and particularly with the contact lenses, the 3D tiles, even the cars, but they are never once distracting. How did you discuss this with your team about creating something so intricate, complex, and real, but have it not be at the forefront?
It's just part of the ethos that, harking back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier about what this film is. It's all about the love story and the human story at the heart of it. So my compass there was if it ever detracted from what was really going on at the emotional core of the film, I knew it wasn't the right decision. In saying that, I also, there's a tipping point or a certain minimum amount of world building that you need to do early on, a bit like the cloning thing, so that the audience can kind of forget about it and believe in an authentic world. So, touches like having the self-driving car, the AR lenses, and things like that quite early on in the film, even in the first scene with the bot that comes up the train carriage. You really want to just, I think, build that world out and then let people sort of forget about it. Annie is just a brilliant, talent, wonderful person, and she completely just got on board with that vision and really helped to make it just sing. She totally got that ethos. It was her instinct as well that we would be subtle with these things. The space that we designed in our labs. We always thought, we don't want this to have, loads of rows of computer screens and cluttered things like that, which have worked great in sci-fi. And I love, the Matrix and movies like that really go down that route. It's phenomenal. But for us, it was always about, how do we keep it minimal? How do we have it story-led, right? When you think about what the place is where Cameron goes to, it's a place where people are going to spend their last days. The people are trying to, invite these people who are spending their last days in and have them feel comfortable and not feel like it's this cold, clinical, sort of hard to trust place. So I think all of our aesthetic decisions were funneled through that filter, about keeping it feeling relatable, subtle, and always story-led.
Wow, that question was from Jason White, by the way, so thank you for your question, Jason. I've another one here from Sean Heffernan, who's asking, can you tell me about the editing process, particularly with the back and forth scenes with Mahershala and Mahershala? Actually, on this, and thank you for that one, Sean, I've read that it was Nathan Nugent was your editor, I believe, and when he was in the edit, he could tell exactly who was Cameron, who was Jack, without being told. That was after
it was brilliant. Yeah, Nathan's amazing, and he it was great. I can't remember exactly when it was, but it might have been about a week into editing, and he'd been working with the working on the assembly and stuff. But he was just like, it's amazing the second whoever it is comes on screen, you just, and it's just a testament to Mahershala's work with finding those inner differences, in the two characters was amazing. I remember an early meeting that me and Mahershala had, maybe the third or fourth time we met, and we started getting into the character a little bit and talking about it. And he started speaking about like details like, well, Cameron's got the weight of the world on his shoulders, and his lungs might feel a bit heavier with that stress, and I was like, wow, I mean, my God, I've always admired Mahershala's physicality in the different roles he takes on. He somehow finds this incredible, the details in the physicality of his characters. And it was that level of detail that he brought to the two characters, that I think add up in a way that's really subtle, but you just somehow know who's who, and so Nathan was was blown away just as soon as he was watching it all, and it was just great, because you do something like that, and you do have you hope that it's gonna play out as you want, and that the characters and you make a slightly brave decision to not have some very differentiating thing between the two characters, and you take that leap, and then a person like an actor like Mahershala comes along, and it works, and that's an amazing moment. He's sitting in the edit knowing, wow, it's there. So yeah,
that's fantastic. Speaking of other amazing actors, going back to Naomie with a question here from Barry Ryan. He says, congrats, Rebecca, Ben, and Naomie. Incredible film, absolutely beautiful. And like Gar and Ben, I'm on the verge of tears again. Naomie, you mentioned that the role of Poppy forced you to challenge some kind of things about yourself and like your acting and vulnerability. Is there anything else working on Swan Song, which seems to have been a great production for everyone involved, that you would take away into future roles in particular? Thank you.
I think not being afraid of working with kids actually is one of the big things, because I learned that kids add so much. They're really unpredictable, but they're totally like centered in the moment. And that's what you're trying to be always as a performer. And I just love the realness of working with kids. And then I actually went on afterwards to be in another production where I was working with kids, and I had no apprehension whatsoever, because I had the experience on Swan Song, and I knew that it would be really magical, and it was. So I take away that. I can't think of anything else now on the spot.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned kids, because I used to always think that you actors shouldn't work with children animals was because they were difficult, but it's because they will steal all of your thunder, apparently.
Oh, is that why?
I think so.
That's what I assumed. I assumed that they would be really difficult. So I thought, oh my God, we're going to have really long days now. The kids are on board. It's going to be really grueling. And instead it was just like really fun. It was really fun.
I think that thing, it's not like, oh, that dog and kid really is. Remember the film with Naomie Harris? No, do you want the cute dog and the cute kid? Oh, yeah. But that's the problem, I think, actors feared it. Guys, we just have time for one or two more questions. But Rebecca, I just wanted to ask you one as well. Like the response to the film has been great. Like it's got great reviews, obviously some Golden Globe nods and stuff like that. As a producer in your first film, like obviously you knew, I imagine you knew you're making something very special, but how has the feedback and response from audiences been for you?
Great, really positive, and I think just closer to home, has with friends and family, and colleagues in the industry, the support has been overwhelming, and that was really nice to come back to, because we did a year in British Columbia, right, and then we came back and we did the guts of, I think it was like 9-10 months in Ireland before Ben went on to New York. And so it was a long journey. It was 2 years technically between prep and release, and then obviously Ben had the 3 years prior. So people knew about it for a while, and then you get nervous about it coming out into the world. And we just received such a fantastic response. But most of all, it was just like the support and encouragement and love back from everybody across the board. And yeah, in Ireland, it's been truly amazing because, due to COVID, we didn't get to go over to London for the screenings. And you know, LA was very brief, but in Ireland it's been unbelievable, really, really great. So
brilliant. Ben, I'm going to give the final word to you. For if anyone's still watching who hasn't seen the film, A, go watch it now. B, what would you like people to take away from Swan Song if they took away one thing?
I never really think about it in that way, I suppose. One of the goals of the film, I think, was to hopefully put, you know, the audience into the shoes of Cameron, you know, and think about what would I do, you know, in that situation. And you know, I think from talking to a lot of people who've seen it, a lot of the audiences after screenings and stuff, it's been lovely how people have immediately started to think about the concept, and they come up and speak to you about, you know, personal things that, you know, loss and love, you know, and also about the concept and like what, you know, they would do. And I end up in all these great sort of conversations with people. So that's been lovely. I think if your film ends and it has a life in the, you know, in the minds or whatever of thoughts of people after that, that's brilliant. So yeah, that's all you can hope for, I think.
Well, I certainly think the film's going to live long with anyone who sees it. And I just want to thank you all again, Rebecca, Benjamin, and Naomie, for your time. It's been so lovely talking to you today. And really could have talked to you for about 10 hours on this. And hopefully we'll get to meet each other in person at some point soon. And I will bore the ears off you all. But thank you all at home for your questions as well. So guys, listen, congratulations, Swan Song, beautiful film, and I really can't wait to see what you all do next. Thank you all so very much for your time, and have a great afternoon.